Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Hello and welcome to day 3 of the Virtual Island Summit 2023. Thank you so much for joining the session. My name is Abia Leons, and I am the project manager here at Island Innovation, and I'm based in the beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm super happy to be presenting this session titled Hometown Heroes, Bridging Community Insights, Traditional Wisdom, and Science. And this session, as you saw earlier, is sponsored by the Waite Institute. Well, island nations are currently chartering a sustainable future with a modern, holistic approach to ocean management. And island communities have long been the ocean's most skilled stewards and observers. Now, the success of modern ocean management kind of hinges on consulting local communities and incorporating traditional wisdom. And that's exactly what this panel is going to do right now. They are going to kind of explore how the future of how ocean management is being shaped by bridging community insights, traditional wisdom, as well as scientific research. Now, you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen sometime now. Just take your time, introduce yourselves and answer the poll. We have like 3 questions. So if you could just fill that out for me. Oh my gosh, I'm checking chat. I'm seeing we have people from all over the place. I'm so happy. Cabo Verde, Bermuda, Guam, Martinique. Hi guys, out there in the Caribbean, from Haiti. Oh, wow. Oh, from California too. Awesome. Yeah, so just keep filling that out. It's really great. Guys, just letting you know, one time we have such a great panel lined up for you all. This session will be amazing. Yeah, I'm super excited. Oh, okay. Jamaica, Fiji. Hi, everybody. Okay. So I'm gonna check the results. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of people from North America, the Caribbean, love that. Oh, y'all show out in the Pacific, lovely. And we have a lot of people coming from NGOs and private organizations, mainly in the environmental and services industries. Awesome. Okay, guys, I'm super happy. Now, well, great. So let me just pass you on, hand you over to the moderator. Oh, but right before we do that, if you have any questions whatsoever during the session, I'd really like you all to put that in the Q&A function, use the Q&A function and just put your questions there, and we'll do our best to answer all of them as much as possible during the session. Okay, so I'm gonna hand you over to our really great moderator, Dr. Nicole. Super glad she's joining us today, and just have a great session, everybody, okay? Dr. Nicole. Hi.
Thank you, Kasalelio Rananim. Welcome everyone from around the globe. Thank you for tuning in. This panel is titled Hometown Heroes, Bridging Community Insights, Traditional Wisdom, and Science. My name is Nicole Yamase, and I am from the islands of Pohnpei and Chuuk in the Federated States of Micronesia. And I also serve as Blue Prosperity Micronesia's science advisor. So the Federated States of Micronesia is an island nation made up of 4 island states, Pohnpei, Yap, Chuuk, and Krushrai, but it also has 607 outer islands scattered across the nation. Each state has its very own unique language, culture, and traditions, and environments as well. We are known to be tiny islands, but we are a large ocean state. We have an exclusive economic zone of 3 million square kilometers. For those who don't know, the FSM is also home to the deepest point on Earth, known as Challenger Deep, located in the Marianas Trench. And I was very fortunate 2 years ago to go down as the first Pacific Islander. Because of our deep connections to our oceans, our government has also committed to protecting 30% of our waters. Last week, our nation became the first to sign the High Seas Treaty, also known as the Agreement on Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. Blue Prosperity Micronesia is also our nation's effort to support sustainable growth and marine resources. This program is government-led with the goal to optimize ocean use, strengthen fisheries management, and support the development of marine industries. We also have exciting news that's coming up. Blue Prosperity Micronesia has partnered with National Geographic Pristine Seas to do an expedition across the FSM. And this is a nationwide assessment that will be conducted to study our waters and to understand the unique environment across our nation. This is important because the expedition's findings will inform future ocean management and marine protection efforts through the development of marine spatial plans. This will also contribute to the Micronesia Challenge to preserve our natural heritage, and it's also in collaboration and consultation with state governments, traditional leaders, all stakeholders to ensure that the expedition aligns with FSM's needs. Now, the FSM is not the only one who has been embarking on this journey. Both Fiji and Vanuatu have recently conducted their own national scientific expedition to better understand their marine environment and resources. So I'm so excited to learn more about how their expedition went and how the community was involved with their expeditions. We are also joined by friends in the Atlantic Ocean hailing from the Azores and Bermuda. Both ocean states are already in the process of gathering feedback from their communities on the development of their marine spatial plans. Now, before we move on to our panelists, I'd like to remind everybody that all the questions will be held at the end of the discussion. So please type your questions in the chat box, include your name, where you're tuning in from, and the name of the person you'd like your question to go to. All right, I'm excited. We have so much to discuss. So let's go to our first panelist, Adriano Quintela, Operational and Information Manager for Blue Azores.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organization of Island Innovation for organizing this incredible event. Also to acknowledge the importance of discussing these issues with our panelists tonight. I'm going to give you a little bit of the background about the Azores. So the Azores is an archipelago of 9 islands that is located quite in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, in the junction of 3 major tectonic plates, the American plate, the Euro-Asian, and the African plate. So quite active in terms of volcanism. The archipelago of the Azores is not an island state, but rather an autonomous region of the Portuguese Republic. However, it's endowed with legal personality under the public law, and its political, legislative, administrative, and financial autonomy is exercised within the framework of the Portuguese Constitution. Regarding the Azorean Sea, it represents over 50% of the overall Portugal maritime territory. And this is quite relevant if we consider that Portugal has one of the largest economic exclusive zones in Europe. We are basically talking about approximately 1 million square kilometers, which at this moment, in the present, only 5% is currently protected, despite the natural values and the recognition, for example, in 2021 by Mission Blue, an international ocean conservation organization, that recognizes the Azores archipelago as an hope spot in terms of biodiversity. Considering this, and also considering the targets that the European states are obliged, namely on the biodiversity strategy for Europe to protect 30%, the Azorean government is fully committed to this goal. Through the implementation of marine protected areas with it in 30% of its maritime territory, with an additional commitment of protecting, of having at least half of this percentage as fully protected. And by fully protected here, we mean without the presence of activities that are based in the extraction of living resources. So the Blue Azores Blue Azores program is government led, that is focused on the conservation of and sustainable use of its sea, and it is a result from international partnership that arose from a common vision between the regional government, the Oceano Azul Foundation, and the Waite Institute. This vision, the vision that is shared in the Blue Azores between these three entities, is to protect, promote, and value the natural capital of the Azores. That started specifically with two scientific expeditions, one in 2016 and one in 2018, also with National Geographic and Pristine Seas. So Blue Azores works very closely with the scientific community of the Azores, gathering decades of top-notch research that has been made in the last decades in the Azores. And the partnership brings this scientific knowledge and expertise to inform each aspect of the program and also in the implementation of marine protected areas. Throughout the process, Blue Azores sought to provide technical support and scientific advice, as I said, that are guided by principles of transparency and collaboration with stakeholders. The program itself, it's in the very crucial moment because we are now finalizing the public consultation of the legislation that designates the Oceanic Marine Protected Areas Network. That was designed in the co-designing process together with stakeholders. And I think this is a really important point to acknowledge that through the use of participative mapping tools, for example, we were able to co-design the areas together with stakeholders in a way to bring a little bit the sense of ownership of this network from the users of the ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adriano. Let's go to our second panelist, John Gibbons, Trust Manager, Harbor Fiduciary Services Limited. You.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good morning. My name is John. As was said, I'm a Trust Manager at Harbor Fiduciary Services Limited, and that was put in the program because we all had to have an organization. But you might take a clue from that I'm not a scientist or a conservationist or a policymaker by profession, unlike my distinguished colleagues, but I am a Bermudian with very, very deep roots, and I'm very concerned about the ocean, particularly our own ocean. And I was kindly invited by people involved with the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program to take part in this panel. So I'd like to thank them for that opportunity, and also everyone who helped put this wonderful event together. So I'll tell you a bit about the background of Bermuda. Bermuda is an island in the North Atlantic. A lot of people think it's in the Caribbean. Culturally, that's somewhat true, but geographically, we're pretty far away, actually. It was first peopled in 1609 by English colonists that were wrecked in a storm. In the age of sail, we were known for producing the best sloops in the Americas, sloops being a kind of small ship. Other things that we've been associated with maritime-wise in our history have included whaling, famous sport fishing, shipwrecks, privateering. Geographically, we have about 200 times as much coral reef as we do land, and the nearest land is the United States, which is 1,000 kilometers away. So we are very tied to the sea here where we are. Politically, we are a British overseas territory, which is a status of British overseas possessions kind of left over from the empire, if you will, that allows for self-government in almost all areas. So we generally run ourselves, although we do have a governor who's a representative of Her Majesty's government, at least Her Majesty's government in the UK. Culturally, you definitely do see that British influence, but there's also lots of influence from the Caribbean, Canada, the US, that word melting pot's used a lot, but it's really true with us. So I will also now tell you about the situation that's in Bermuda. Now, those colonists that I mentioned, those English ones, they arrived to an absolutely teeming marine ecosystem. I read some early accounts of their ability to fish and what was going on there. And even if you control for the fact that they were writing back to the investors in the Virginia company, who technically at that point owned Bermuda, and they wanted to show what a good job they'd done, even if you kind of tamp down that exaggeration, it's still unbelievable what they saw here. And unfortunately, that's not really what we see today. The positives environmentally, the coral is in very good shape. Our northerly position, I think, makes us somewhat resistant to bleaching. The corals that grow here, I think, are also particularly hardy because we have a winter and a lot of seasonal change. So they have to be strong enough to withstand temperature changes anyway. The vast majority of our fishing is pole and line. There's really not much going on with nets or trawling in that regard. And there are no major extractive industries. The negatives include things like our inshore bays used to be very big seagrass habitat up until quite recently even. They're now massively deteriorated, unfortunately, with the attendant biodiversity loss there. On the reef, of which we have so much, there's an unfortunate lack of biodiversity and of biomass. And what you see out there is generally the stuff that we don't eat, including species that have been protected. And I find this to be no coincidence. In the 1970s, we introduced the Fisheries Act, which was a kind of our big piece of conservation law. And it has subsequently been amended, sometimes in significant ways, but right now it kind of needs a big overhaul, I would say. And it's for this reason that we come to the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program, program, commonly known as the BOP. Now, the BOP is a collaboration between the Bermuda government, the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, known as BIOS, and the Waite Institute that began in 2019, sometime after the Bermuda government had released, a research paper saying that, we needed to overhaul our environmental and use system of the ocean. And that's exactly what this is. It's a comprehensive overhaul of Bermuda's conservation and use. It involves two parts. One is the Marine Spatial Plan, which is conservation-based. It involves fully protecting 20% of our offshore area, if you will, although not the entire EEZ, just the part called the Bermuda Platform, which is on top of the undersea volcano that we're on. And then there's going to be a superior management system for the other 80%. With that, we have the Blue Economy Strategy, which involves sustainable fisheries, sustainable marine tourism, clean energy, and other blue investment. And the idea there is to create a solid, sustainable ocean economy well into the future. Community involvement has been very deliberate. Beginning in 2020, the BOP released the Ocean Use Survey, where they got 1,400 respondents from 20 local stakeholder groups to say how they use the ocean and what they'd like to see, happen in the future. That was used to develop the plan, which was released to the public last year for review and comment. There was public consultation at that point. Earlier this year, there was a series of focus groups for further for further consultation by the public and further opportunity to, have their for the public to have their say. And in terms of its reception, it has been somewhat controversial. Some don't like the whole idea altogether. Some like it, but disagree with the execution. And some people absolutely love it. But, I think that's how society works, right? Everyone has a different viewpoint. On balance, I think it's a very good idea. And I look forward to seeing it develop, as time goes by.
Thank you, John, for sharing about the ocean history of Bermuda and your work, and also sharing about BOP. Let's move on to our third panelist, Andrew Paris, who's the science coordinator for Blue Prosperity Fiji.
Everybody. My name is Andrew Paris, and I am the environmental coordinator for Blue Prosperity Fiji. Now, I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of background about Fiji, where it's located, a little bit of geography as well, for those of you not too familiar with Fiji. And then I'm going to talk about the status of community and ocean management in Fiji. And that's going to lead me into a little bit of a presentation on my role and what Blue Prosperity Fiji does. So, as Republic of the Fiji Islands is often termed a small island developing state. Recently, I'm hearing terms like big ocean sovereign state or BOSS, or sometimes a Pacific Island country and territory, picked. You can pick and choose which one you want. Needless to say, we're a very small island, a group of islands in a very large ocean space. Fijians have an inextricable and intrinsic connection to the ocean. We have an EEZ that is 70 times larger than our landmass. So the total area of our exclusive economic zone is around 1.3 million square kilometers. And the total area of our landmass is around 30,000 square kilometers. And I'm just going to quote a famous Pacific Island writer and anthropologist who said, "We in the Pacific are not defined by the smallness of our islands. We are defined by the greatness of our oceans. We are the sea, we are the ocean, and Oceania is us." So that's from Professor Epeli Haofa, who was a writer and anthropologist out of the University of the South Pacific, where I spent the last 4 or 5 years before joining Blue Prosperity Fiji. Now, Fiji and Fijians have had a history of ocean management since time immemorial. Marine protection and sustainable management has always been a part of our culture. Millennia, thousands of years ago, right, there were already a series or a set of locally managed marine areas called tambu areas. Now, tambu is a Fijian, it's also a Polynesian word on which the word taboo comes from. So it's an area that was forbidden. And this area that was sometimes permanently, sometimes temporarily closed to fishing. And there were several reasons why tambu areas were put in place. Usually it was like a repository or like a bank account in which you could access in times of feast or famine, the installation of a chief, welcoming guests to your island. So you always had a little bit of natural capital available. All right. This is something upon which a program called the Fiji Locally Managed Marine Areas, and then what became LMMAs, or Locally Managed Marine Areas. So this concept was taken from Fiji and the Pacific and spread to other areas as a model for ocean management. Now, just a little bit about Blue Prosperity Fiji. So in 2020, the Wait Institute approached the Fiji government an MOU was signed, and under this MOU was under this MOU in which the Blue Prosperity Fiji program was born. Now it's in a nutshell, it's a government-led initiative that incorporates community consultation, scientific research, traditional knowledge to sustainably manage 100% of Fiji's ocean space and to designate 30% protected areas while supporting ocean industries and fisheries management. So the program came in to help Fiji, to help the nation implement and operationalize some of our commitments in the ocean space. Now, the program includes close collaboration with communities, stakeholders, NGOs, and existing ocean management efforts in Fiji, right? And it's designed to support inclusion, equity, traditional knowledge, so we can improve long-term economic sustainability and livelihoods of ocean ecosystems. Now, I'm going to stop there. I'm really keen to hear what some of the other panelists are saying. So, and thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing about Blue Prosperity Fiji, and I'm looking forward to learning about the expedition you guys just did. Let's move on to our last panelist, Steve Hango, Senior Desk Officer, Vanuatu Department of Foreign Affairs, Maritime and Ocean Affairs Division.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve, as Dr. Nicole mentioned. I work for the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Division under the Department of Foreign Affairs here in Vanuatu. Just a brief geography about Vanuatu. Vanuatu is made up of 83 islands. We gained our independence back in 1980, and that was when we started our ocean as a journey. We started off by firstly just being part of the UNCLOS back in 1982, and then from then onwards we saw that our ocean space was 98%, so we had to sustainably manage it. Yes. So in terms of our oceans program here in Vanuatu, we as I mentioned, we started our oceans program like nationally back in 1982. But before that, we were, as my colleague Andrew mentioned, we already were part of the ocean, as he mentioned, as also being part of a large ocean state. Vanuatu is Vanuatu took a very traditional step in terms of managing its ocean space. We saw that we couldn't. We saw that to move forward, we had to look back where we had come from in terms of managing, because we saw that we have been managing sustainably our oceans for thousands of years, and to move forward, we had to look back on some of our practices we were doing in the past. So part of that was, as I mentioned, Vanuatu is very culturally diverse. So I'm going to look into like my perspective on how the ocean means to us. So growing up, for us in my island, my home island where I came from, to us the ocean had only three uses. The first use of the ocean was a place where we would gather salt for our meals. The second use of the ocean was a place where we would catch fish to eat. It was a source of protein for us. And the third use of the ocean was it was more sense of cultural linkage to us. It was where we had our last final bath before we move on to the afterlife. So somehow the ocean was already connected to us before that. So the ocean means a lot to us here in Vanuatu, and currently working now with the ocean has made me appreciate our ocean space more. And one of the things we're doing now is developing we launched our ocean policy back in 2016, and we saw that the fundamental building block of that ocean policy to make it more effective was to have an MSP. And so currently we're developing our MSP in collaboration with the Wake Institute. And so we just came back from the sea, 3 weeks at sea for our Blue Prosperity Vanuatu expedition, and it was an eye-opener for us. We always see the sea as a flat space, but under the sea, under the waters, there's a lot of biodiversity down there. There's mountains, there's huge canyons, there's creeks that run so deep, and for us here it was very eye-opening for us to see our resources down there. So I think I'm going to go further into the expedition, how the expedition would be beneficial to our MSP. So we saw that traditional knowledge does work. The thing is, in Vanuatu now, we are trying to incorporate science into traditional knowledge. So how science could help our traditional governance systems to better manage our ocean space. So our data that we collected would be beneficial to the communities in making them to carry out more better informed decisions on how best to manage the ocean space. Vanuatu, as I said, it is a very vulnerable country in terms of cyclones. We have 3 to 5 cyclones every cyclone season. And we also have, with the current climate change, we also have been having cyclones outside and intense cyclones as well, category 4, category 5 cyclones. And if we don't look after our ocean space, we would lose a lot of our linkages to the ocean, as I mentioned. We had a pilot site back in one of our islands, and in 2020 we did a baseline survey there, and based on 10 transits, our fish count there was 622. And from then onwards, we took the data, we took it to the community, we showed them that this is your reef now. It's very stressed, and this is your fish count. And we taught them the importance of keeping the reef and food chain in a sustainable manner. So, and then we gave the community the information, and then we left them to do their own decisions on how to manage the reef. So 2 years later, we went back to the same spot. We did the same dives on the same dive sites, and incredibly, with the help of science, helping traditional knowledge, we found that the fish count 2 years later was 6,224, which was way more than we expected. And it's a good example on how science and science techniques could help sustainably manage our ocean here in the Pacific. And I would just like to encourage our viewers watching live that you have to value your ocean, not only value it, but also appreciate it. And people forget that storms begin in the ocean and end in the ocean. So I would like to just end there. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Wow, thank you to each of our panelists. We can see that each of you are key players in your own respective areas, in your own line of work, trying to protect our oceans. And the overlapping of our work is that it's community involvement and also making sure that the science is brought back to our community, to also embrace our cultural heritage as Pacific Islanders, as ocean lovers. And as some of them mentioned, that the ocean is so important to us, that we're so connected to it, our identity, our culture and traditions. And, you know, as an Indigenous scientist, the interweaving of science and Indigenous knowledge is so critical for us to move forward with our efforts to protect our ocean. We've heard some challenges of, you know, seabeds, declining fish populations, but also everybody is not happy, you know. So one of the questions that I have is, in your different islands, in your different work, how or what do you guys think is the most effective way to communicate the data and science to the local community? Because it's always a challenge.
Can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
I can speak about the experience of the Blue Azores program. We have divided the process of designating areas in two. So basically, we have the offshore process and the coastal process. And on the offshore, so two different approaches. In the offshore process, what we did to involve stakeholders in the decision, to involve stakeholders in the community in the definition of the areas, was basically to import all the data that we had in terms of the mapping of the natural values and the systematic conservation approach of the prioritization areas for conservation into the mapping, participative mapping tool, SeaSketch. And I think I reinforce the importance of this tool because it was a quite easy and immediate way of stakeholders start putting lines on the map. And doing that, we were able to assess the performance of those areas immediately, almost live. And this was made, the performance was made with a common base, which was the specific conservation objectives that were sent by us by science and discussed with stakeholders. So science gave us the specific conservation objectives, and those were discussed and approved in the stakeholder engagement process. So with this information, we were able to start drawing maps, and with this this interaction was really interesting because it's almost a bilateral process of giving information, but also gathering a lot of information. I think the best way of engaging and passing information to the users, to the communities, is also acknowledge that we also have a lot to learn. Once you establish this connection, this trust connection, it becomes more easy to have this informed decisions. On the coastal process, the process was different because the conflicts are higher. Also, the knowledge that we have in terms of use, it's not as high as in the offshore, because in the offshore we have VMS, vessel tracking systems, and whatsoever, and the activities are not so intense. So in the coastal, we start by asking, as Bermuda also did, asking users how they use their space, and with and what is the level of importance of the areas for their activity. And we did that with the use of a survey, also with the use of SeaSketch participative mapping tool. And this way we were able to have a clear idea of how the ocean in the coastal areas are used and how communities value the areas that they use. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adriano. I agree that having that foundation of trust and being able to the sharing of information between community and research is so critical to moving forward with our efforts. And I like that, they asked the community how to use their space. So even simple actions like that, asking them how to use their space it seems like a small gesture, but it's huge to them because it shows that we are asking them for help and that we trust that they also have the traditional knowledge to make decisions for themselves, for their own space. Thank you. Does anybody want to chime in?
Hi. Yeah, I will if I might.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not a scientist, but I am a member of the public. So I'll tell you that the science was communicated to me through the plan itself, the actual document. I actually, when I first read about it in the news, I made all sorts of assumptions as to what the plan was and was immediately against it. I then decided to actually read it and began to agree with it. So that's certainly one way. As I mentioned, the whole plan and the science behind it has been being communicated to people through the print media, online media, focus groups, town hall meetings, various other media. I don't know if people have been going into schools. I assume they must be, and I would think that that's probably the best possible way to get the science. Maybe depending on the age of the pupils, you can't necessarily give them the absolute in-depth science. But I'll also say something that struck me as a non-scientist that I hope isn't heresy to the scientists out there, that sometimes I feel that rigorous science can actually stand in the way of these messages. I mean, we've had certain stakeholder groups who are against the idea, doing a lot of what we saw in, what humanity saw in the 20th century, where you've got oil and gas companies and say tobacco companies, they sort of muddied the message by saying, well, the science isn't settled yet, and managed to cast doubt on things. There are certain things that I don't know that you necessarily can prove, up to a scientific standard. So for example, the accounts that I mentioned of when the English first got to Bermuda, the state that they saw the ecosystem in, I mean, that's not scientific, right? That's just them writing. There's things that I've heard from older people who got it from their parents, there used to be groupers, where the yachts are now, or whatever. You can't really prove that. Sometimes, hanging out with marine biologists and conservationists, when I mention something scientific, I get a lot of negativity. Where they say, well, that's not the particularly good method because X, Y, Z. And so all I mean to say with this is, while science is very, very important, and you should definitely prove things to a scientific standard wherever possible, but I don't know that it's actually paramount to getting the message out there, because some things, to my mind, are self-explanatory. For example, like I said, when you go out on the reef or into any of these inshore bays, and the species of fish that you see are not the edible ones, I mean, that's just that to me is self-evident, the issue. So that's just something I wanted to say.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, our ancestors, the elders, have all these traditional knowledge that they have these environmental cues that let them know, oh, when should we fish, or what fish to eat, or when to plant things. And like you said, schools, science, bringing that to the education system. How do we get our kids to understand science at such a young age, but also to be effective science communicators? I think that's a huge area that we all need to learn how to gather data, but also share it with our community. Sorry, Stephen, Andrew, for your in regards to like youth involvement with the expedition, did you guys have any activities that involved the youth?
Thank you, Dr. Nicole, for the question. If I can just address the earlier question you that John and Adrian addressed quite comprehensively. I think everyone had a strategy for the dissemination of the results. But I want to step back a bit and talk about how the communities were approached. How do we hear their voices before we start presenting them with any new information? How do we garner? How do we glean their concerns? Makalesi in the chat actually touched on it very well. She talked about a Talanoa framework, a Talanoa concept in the Pacific and in Fiji. It's quite strong. So getting into the communities, sitting on the mat is usually done with some cover, and just hearing their concerns, hearing some of their stories as holders of owners of traditional knowledge, as being rightful custodians of some of their stories, and to hear some of their experiential knowledge. That is really important to inform and advise some of the work that we're doing. So that was really important for us. And in terms of getting, and that really helps to frame how we package, or how we put together some of the results, and some of the findings from initiatives like the Ocean News Survey or the scientific expedition, that can really help us frame some of the message to take back to them. And there's different ways you can take it back to them. There's more conventional forms of media. There is using government and more traditional infrastructure to help make sure the message is heard by the people that are more acutely aware of some of the issues around ocean stewardship and ocean management. And to address the more second question you asked, Dr. Nicole, we as a principle at the onset or an inception phase of Food Prosperity Fiji, we have to make sure it's as inclusive as possible. So we're utilizing youth, utilizing some of our early career Pacific Island researchers and scientists to be a part of this, and to also be a part of the entire journey from collecting information and relaying it back to them. So just thought I'd share that to you all. Vinaka, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Steve, would you like to share about any youth opportunities that were conducted throughout the Vanuatu expedition?
Thank you. So in terms of Vanuatu's youth involvement, we based on COVID protocols, so a lot of youths were directly involved with the expedition. But in terms of analyzing the data, yes, we are engaging youths to help analyze that with the help of SPC's PCOS program, which enables early ocean career professionals. So with that program, we are involving youths to help analyze our data. And important thing is that data. It's good to involve youths, because the data collected, it's not going to be for us, it's for them and their children and their children. So it's very important in terms of the Vanuatu's government initiative to make those youths to have to appreciate that data collected, and not only appreciate it, but take ownership of that. So they would have a sense of pride and responsibility to take care of the ocean space based on that data collected. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, Talanoa, it's so like our islands are so diverse. There's so many different cultural protocols that need to be taken, need to be followed. People don't just come, do science, collect data, and just like spit it out to the community. There are cultural protocols that need to be taken, like drinking kava, the sakao, talanoa, where we follow these protocols in order to align our minds, our hearts, and spirits, and to share our shared values of protecting our oceans. Are there other, do you guys have traditional ways or other protocols that have been taken, the steps that have been taken in order to approach communities or share data aside from Talanoa?
Sorry, can I? It's not related to that specific question, but I think it's important that we acknowledge and we recognize that there are two ways of you can think about this in the short term on communicating short term, but we also have to think about communicating long term, preparing the future generations to receive and to speak about to speak the same language in terms of ocean and conservation. And on that purpose, I think it's important also to share with you that we have an action, a support plan in the Azores regarding Blue Azores. We call it Education for a Blue Generation. And basically this program, what it does is to bring the ocean language and the materials to the schools. And we already reached 109 schools. We already formed almost 500 teachers in the Azores. How to bring the programs of education and to while teaching the normal programs, to use the language of sustainability and the ocean. I think it's really important that we don't think just on the short term, but we start educating the next generation to the challenges that the society face at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriano. We're also, for the STEM expedition coming up, we also have something called the Exploration Classroom, where students are able to tune in and follow the expedition and also learn about the research vessel, the submersible, and the science that will be happening in October to November. So that's always exciting for the kids to go and talk to them and get them involved, because I think it just sparks just being from the islands, having passion and love for the ocean, being able to be involved with the process, but also understand it as well, I think sparks a huge fire within our youth. And I hope that, leads them to pursue marine biology or be ocean warriors for our regions. A question for anybody who wants to answer. What do you envision for the future ocean management? What does it look like? And what makes you optimistic?
Yes, I'll have a first stab at this, Dr. Nicole. So, I mean, this is something that was that we got after intense and comprehensive discussions with the community and the diverse range of communities around Fiji, who some expressed concerns about these fancy agreements that are being conceived and ratified in places like Paris or New York, and then having to take something that was crafted in somewhere else and then brought and then tried to be implemented on the ground in the Pacific. I mean, that's something which opened my eyes as well. And it's something that my Vanuatu counterparts, Stevie and Tony, advocate for as well, is making sure that any commitments, any concerns, or any any components of any national strategy on ocean management be born out of what we call in Fiji the vanua, or being born out of the local communities. It has to be a bottom-up approach. Otherwise, it's hard to take something that's foreign and then try and use that top-down approach. So, and in doing so, we need to create spaces. Talanoa, we need to be hearing voices from the communities, and having local voices, local champions, having their voices amplified, so we can then hear what the concerns are on the ground and then try to implement that vertically from bottom to the top, rather than trying to ascribe to something that was formulated in places outside of the Pacific. Vinaka.
I'll go next if I may. Yeah, I'd like to see something that is dynamic and living. I think that's very important. You know, as I said, our big piece of ocean conservation legislation is from the 1970s. You know, so I think what would be great is if, you know, where we can respond to threats and opportunities as they come. So if, for example, an area has been closed, you know, to increase biomass there, if it recovers, then, you know, we should let people take advantage of that in a sustainable way. Similarly, if there's been a problem somewhere, some kind of collapse, actually, I should give full credit to the government this year who've made moves both in the recreational and commercial spheres to protect spiny lobsters by cutting licenses in half. It meant that I missed out on my license, so I was very annoyed for about an hour, but then I saw the sense in it. You know, things like that would be very good. And it also should be living in terms of, you know, consistent engagement and enforcement of rules. Some stakeholder groups who've been in somewhat opposition to the BOP have said, well, why don't we just enforce the rules that we have on the books now? And that is a very solid point, I have to say. So something that's not just, you know, written down, put into law, implemented at least on the ground floor, and then we say, cool, job done. You know, it's really got to be something that's living and evolving as time goes on.
Well, can I just, I fully agree with John on that one. If we are asking people to, not to specifically fishermen, if we are asking people not to use that space, the least we can do is to show that this area is providing the benefits that we are expecting. And this is one of the things that we are still missing a lot, to show, because we think about marine protected areas as a bank where you deposit natural value, but you need to acknowledge and you need to show the communities that these areas are working, and we need to make sure that we do that with in a periodical way, and I think it's really important that stakeholders see the benefits from it, because normally what is the current practice is that we create the areas, as John says, and then we expect that the so-called spillover effects happen without measuring those effects. And I think this is a really valid point that I want to acknowledge.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, consistently evolving, because there's the idea of, you know, the short versus long term, and we want long term. And as Adriano mentioned, also that the stakeholders want to see that the work they're doing works. And what do you guys think about parachute science? I think Adriano also mentioned earlier of having that foundation of trust between all stakeholders, the community and scientists. But sometimes, you know, that also takes a long time to develop trust between the communicators because of the problems of parachute science. Does anybody want to speak on that?
I can speak a little bit because fortunately for us and for Blue Azores program, this trust was built with scientists from the Azores for decades from now, and we benefit from it. And this trust was built by the fact that this relationship, for example, in sampling programs all over the years are done together with scientists and fishermen in the vessels. So this connection of trust was built prior to the creation of the program, and I think we benefited from it. And I really think that it's important not only for the stakeholders, for the users, trust the scientists, but also for the scientists speak the same language as the communities, because we cannot expect that all scientists are good communicators, as we already spoke before, and sometimes scientists need to acknowledge their lack of capability of speaking the same language as the users. And just to give you an example, in one meeting I had with the scientists, and one of them said, well, the stakeholders don't understand this. And my immediate reaction was to say, no, that's not true. The fact is that you are not being able to explain to stakeholders in the correct way. So I think it's also important that science steps back a little bit in terms of the approach and realize that sometimes it's the scientists that cannot communicate science in the best way.
Thank you, Adriana. You really hit important points, like having indigenous scientists, having those special people who can be the bridge between the scientists and the community. That's so important to have, because like you said, the trust was already there. Steve and Andrea, I was wondering, working with Blue Prosperity Fiji and in Vanuatu, being someone from the local community, a trusted person, how did that benefit or help the process with the decisions and distributing of science and talking to the communities? Because I'm also going to go home to the FSM and also be the bridge between science and the community. So I was wondering how you guys' identity as natives, how has that helped the process? Or was there also challenges that you faced?
Thank you. So I'll let Andrew answer after, but in my case in Vanuatu, before the expedition came, we had nationwide consultations for our national ocean policy, and also we had nationwide consultations on our marine spatial plan, and we also did our for our national ocean governance framework. We had to do assessment on all our marine resources. So based on all that, we basically went all throughout the country numerous times, doing consultations, doing assessments. And when the expedition came, it was very helpful for me as a Nivan or a local. Joining the expedition was knowing the different islands, where to berth the ship, where to dive, good spots to dive, safe anchorages. Also knowing community members there, and in one instance, I had to go ashore to reassure the communities that the expedition was not as they were thinking. Like they thought the expedition was to damage corals. It was a fishing expedition, but I went ashore to reassure them that it was a government-led initiative, and it was to help the communities there. And Yes, and seeing familiar faces, the communities there, they responded well to all our sites. Yeah, I'll let Andrew answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Stevie. Just to touch on what Adriana mentioned as well earlier. There's a famous saying: you speak to speak to someone, you speak to their head. You speak to someone in their language, you speak to their soul. So I think, and I'm very thankful that our colleagues at the Wait Institute see the utility in engaging and in working with local teams, local scientists, local advocates, because it just helps. It just helps. It helps things progress a little bit quicker. As Stevie mentioned as well, if people in the communities and people in NGOs are familiar and they trust you, I think it really helps you take another step in the right direction. It's the same for communities as well. So speaking the language is a very important thing for communities that have their own traditional languages, and they're very, what's the word? They uphold the traditional languages quite stringently. So for us, that was very important, and I'm so grateful that I work for a program, and my colleagues at the Wait Institute see the utility of engaging local scientists, not just because it helps with the program, but because it helps build ownership and on the ground, and it builds capacity for some of the local teams who may not have the fancy academic qualifications, but who have all the desirable traits to really help the work progress. So thank you.
Thank you both very much. Could you guys share some of the challenges, or do you guys have advice for the FSM as we prepare for our expedition?
Yes, the biggest challenge here for us in Vanuatu was knowing when, based on weather conditions, knowing where the next dive site was 24 hours. So I would advise the FSM that do consultations before the expedition on all the dive sites you guys are planning to do. We had a few challenges in terms of weather conditions but otherwise it was smooth from then on.
On the Azores, Blue Azores experience, it's not it's more an advice in terms of communicate, because normally expeditions are the best way to show people why we do what we do. Normally people recognize what's in the sea based on the fish that they see in the market, and this is not the best way to acknowledge the need for conservation. So for us, it was really a really important step to communicate the images, the results, all that you guys see in those expeditions are really important for communities to be part of your to become on your side on this endeavor that is ocean conservation.
Yeah, I think it's exciting times, because this is also going to be the first for FSM's expedition, and so to have the involvement of like intergenerational, seeing our leaders to the adults to our youth, see what's happening, and to also get curious about what we're doing, what we're collecting. I think it's such a beautiful sight to see, because our elders would never think of being in a bubble, a glass bubble submersible, going down to these depths and actually seeing things that we didn't know that were down in our waters. And so, like, going down to Challenger Deep and coming back to share my experience with everybody, it's still something that, that's so unbelievable. And it's still something that I still can't believe happened. But to be the eyes, to be the spokesperson, to be the communicators for our regions through our work is so important, to bring areas of the ocean that not everybody gets to access to the surface. And so that's the beauty of, working in our fields and communicating, like you said, communicate, and learning how to be effective communicators, and ensuring that everybody feels involved, everybody feels that they have space and ownership of the ocean and land as well. But communicate, yes, very important. John, I was wondering, so you mentioned like seeing different like changes over time with the seagrass beds. How do you communicate to like people who don't really care about the ocean or don't have those childhood experiences like you do?
That's a very good question. In all honesty, I often don't. It's not my main profession. So it often won't come up unless I bring it up. And then, after you've been talking for 10 straight minutes at a dinner party about the dropping grouper population, people's eyes may begin to glaze over, particularly if they're eating grouper. Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. I try not to be arrogant or hectoring about it. I try to be very matter of fact. But one thing people are very interested in is, these stories that come down to you from older people, and they're just kind of amazed when you put that contrast together. I mean, my favorite one is, so we now have a rule that you can't spearfish off the beach. And it has to be at least a mile offshore, unless you're going for lionfish. That's a different conservation measure. And spear guns haven't been legal for a very long time. You have to use a pole spear and all these things. And, my grandfather told me that when he was a boy, his mother could send him off the beach spearfishing, which at the time was normal. And she could tell him exactly what kind of fish he wanted and what size, how many people she intended to feed that night. And that would be impossible today. I mean, you'd be anyone who even goes snorkeling. That whole idea is just absolutely laughable. And so those are the sorts of things that you can transmit because they have that, that interest value. Which is a lot better than, for example, the seagrass is one thing. One side effect of losing the seagrass is we have these wonderful glowworms. I don't know where they appear where else in the world, but in the summer, around the full moon, they mate. They jump up out of the seagrass and light up. And in years gone by, these bays would be just even when I was a child, they would be absolutely covered in these flashing little lights. And they're barely anywhere to be seen now. So, little stories with the interest value, I mean, it's a little bit better than you actually going to these bays and going, well, this is pathetic. But at the same time, people do need to know that, you need to know, I'm 34, and if I can tell them, even in my memory, this was way more, impressive, let alone 100 years ago, let alone 500 years ago. So I guess just a mixture of trying to get it out there, trying to be matter of fact, but also trying not to saturate people or sound a little too, I guess maybe even to say crazy in their minds, because as you say, it's just not really a priority for a lot of people. Or I guess I could sum it up by just saying bit by bit, just do it bit by bit,
I love that you said stories, because that's how our legends were and knowledge was passed on, was basically through stories. Like my in Pohnpei, we inherit our clan from our mother's side. And so my legend story is the stingray. And stories is like being a Pacific Islander, we have this intimate connection, but like talking to people who are not of the islands, stories are a way to connect to them. It brings the human perspective and also the magical perspective of sharing stories to share knowledge or to share lessons or to translate something. And so thank you for sharing your story and talking about your grandpa and having all these childhood memories, because not everybody gets to have that. And we're so blessed that we do, and that we are able to share it with others so that they could, we can help change minds or perspectives about the ocean and let them care more. Like, the ocean to them may be just like a body of water, a place to just extract or study, but to us, that's our livelihoods, that's our culture, that's our very existence, that's our identity. And so to share and to try to share that with those who don't have that intimate connection is so important. And like you said, bit by bit, we're just going to change hearts and we're going to change minds, and hopefully all share the same goal of protecting our oceans for future generations to come. Anybody have ocean stories to share?
Well, I have a lot of ocean stories, but what I want to say is that even though I know it's hard for some people to get into some people in terms of what is the importance of ocean conservation, I think we are still lucky, because it's way harder to talk to people if they live in a mountain in the middle of far away from the ocean. And I think as islanders and as island territories, at least I think it's easier to explain people the importance of the ocean for their own survival, and the impacts of not protecting in terms of food security, climate change. I think it's really, I think it's easier for us islanders to explain, because whether we want it or not, we are all dependent from the ocean, and I think islanders acknowledge this easier than other cultures.
Andrew, Steve, do you guys have any ocean stories from the expedition? Or even just your childhood as well?
I'll let Andrew answer that.
Thank you so much, Stevie, for that. Yeah, okay, I guess I can share a story. So we started the committee consultation work for the expedition in February, and in retrospect, it took about as much time doing the consultation work than doing the actual scientific expedition. Fiji has a unique tenureship and governance structures for nearshore environments where what we call Ngoli areas. So these are parcels of nearshore environment which go from the high water mark to the reef that are basically owned by the state, but the local communities have user rights to it. And the local communities have close cultural connections to totem fish species, to sacred reefs, sacred spawning grounds, and places and flora, fauna, and sites that hold unique cultural values to the local communities. So just hearing the stories in the course of the 3-month community consultations. So it was one, presenting what we call a sebu, so requesting permission to dive in their traditional fishing grounds, but also getting a chance to sit down and talanoa with them about what are some of their unique marine areas of value to them. What are some of their totem species? What are some of the changes that they're seeing? And that was, to me, that was very, very valuable to me. And that to me, that was the highlight. Just getting to communities and seeing what their perspectives on valued ocean spaces are. And like Stevie mentioned, it also really helped inform exactly where some of the dive sites are. So in formulating our dive sites, we looked at areas of ecological and cultural significance, and trying to have a representative sample of both, including areas within tambu areas or locally protected marine areas and areas outside, to try and ascertain and see if there's any differences, observed differences between the sites. And sure enough, a lot of the sites that held traditional cultural values were proven to be, observed as such on the ground. And to me, that's quite powerful as well, in vindicating or justifying or observing in a scientific way some of that traditional knowledge that we managed to garner and to determine while we're doing the consultations. So again, there's so many stories on the 90 or so odd days in which we did the expedition in Fiji. Saw some amazing things, but to me, hearing some of the stories from the local communities was a real highlight. Vinaka. Stevie, your turn now.
Okay, I would just like to share one story about one of the islands down south, Futuna Island. It's an isolated island down south in Vanuatu, and back in February this year, we got hit by 2 Category 4 cyclones, 72 hours apart, and there was a huge widespread damage on majority of the islands. Futuna was also badly damaged. One thing a lot of people didn't notice was a lot of people always see damages from cyclones on land. We were so fortunate enough to see the damage that the cyclone caused underwater. It took huge trees. Futuna is an uplift, so it's 600 meters above water with huge drops of the coast. It took huge trees, full trees that it took down and wiped out the corals, and it's just stacked the trees in a long line about 10 to 20 meters, which looked like someone put it there as a wall. But it was just the power of the ocean, and it was very amazing to witness such strength of our ocean. So yeah, just one of many stories.
Thank you, everyone. I think this might be the end of our panel, but I want to thank each of you panelists, John, Adriano, Stevie, Andrew. Thank you all for sharing story. I'm so excited for the upcoming expedition, and thank you for sharing your advice and sharing about your work. We're so grateful to have each of you as, stewards of our ocean, and I'm sure our paths will cross again. Thank you all so much for also touching on, the challenges that we face, but also talking about how resilient our islands are and how important the ocean is to us as Pacific Islanders, as ocean lovers, and how that ties to, the global efforts that we're trying to do to protect our ocean. So thank you. Thank you all so much. Kalangan lap and kiriso tapor.
Thank you, guys. This was such an amazing session and certainly sparked a fire in me. Just because, again, I am from Trinidad, a small island in the Caribbean, so I fully understand the struggles that come with just being a small island nation, and everything you all said, I really resonated with it, and I'm so glad I got to be part of this session and hear the stories. It was really inspiring. So thank you to our speakers, our moderators, and of course, thank you so much for those who participated, who attended. I would really love for you to just leave some comments and thoughts on the session in the chat. That would be really helpful for us. And also, I'd just like to make a little announcement for the Global Sustainable Island Summit being held from May 22nd to May 23rd. It's actually an in-person conference organized by Island Innovation, and it's co-hosted by the government of Prince Edward's Island, Canada. We'll be basically gathering professionals, researchers, policymakers, and a few industry leaders to discuss and explore more innovative solutions and advancements in sustainable energy. So I believe we have like early bird tickets available still. You can check it out by this link. But again, thank you so much to our speakers, participants. I really, really enjoyed this session. And thanks for tuning in. Guys, I think we have a networking session just after this one, so you can check back the link on our website, and or it will also be in an email if you want to attend that as well. Okay, so it's nighttime by me, so good night, good morning, good afternoon, and we'll see you all later. Okay, bye bye.